Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are and when you're listening to this. I'm Jan Hoek. I'm here to welcome you to this 50th Areopa webinar. So, cause for celebration in the form of yet another webinar. Today we have Bert, who's going to tell us about how to sync your Business Central data with Azure Data Lake. Oops. I always do it wrong here. A few practical things before we start. Your mic is muted as always. Please type your questions, if any, in the questions window in your GoToWebinar application. And Bert has given me permission to interrupt him when there are questions. So we'll ask him straight away. We're not going to collect the questions until the end. Right. Those of you who are familiar with Areopa webinars will probably also be aware that there's a huge library of past presentations on YouTube. Warmly recommended. Also very practical if you want to refer your coworkers, or if you get questions from coworkers, you can refer them to these presentations. That's about the past presentations, but of course there are also upcoming presentations. If you want to be informed about upcoming presentations, it's very useful to subscribe to the newsletter, using this this link here. Or you could also go to the Areopa webinar website. Let me move my window. Areopa.academy, and there you'll also find future webinars. Two of which I would like to highlight. In 2 weeks' time, on May the 10th, we have a presentation by Christoph, who is going to tell us about DevOps and Docker in real life. That's going to be Docker and DevOps in scenarios that are not your typical product development scenarios. So think on-prem development, think for tenant extensions. And another 2 weeks after that, Hendrik is going to give a presentation about give the user a chance. That will be about, well, nothing to say about usability and discoverability. So patterns and best practices that will help your users use your app more effectively and more easily. So very useful knowledge, I think. Well, before I hand over to Bert, I would like to thank our... Oh, sorry, I forgot. We're obviously always looking for new subjects and new speakers. So if you have any suggestions, please get in touch with Areopa. And now I would like to thank our sponsor for making this possible. And yeah, I can. All I have to say is enjoy the presentation, and Bert, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Jan, for the introductions. And this webinar will go, what Jan also told, is about syncing your data with Azure Data Lake, and also with the new extension that Microsoft has created in Business Central 90, the Data Archive. So a couple of topics that I want to mention this is what we are going to do is especially about the Azure Data Lake, but also with the Data Archive, some tips and tricks, and also what is done with the Azure Synapse. So that's covers the whole webinar. First, a very small introduction of myself. I'm Bert Verbeek, live in the Netherlands, working with BC and NEV for 15 years in several roles, from functional consultants to right now I'm a technical solution architect at the VPS Group. And recently, last year, I started my own site, bertverbeek.nl. And there's also some information about this topic about the Azure Data Lake. But first, when we start is why should you sync your data with Azure Data Lake? And the first is the API request that is now on BizCentral has some limits. It doesn't work with quite a lot of data. If you must transfer 80 gigabyte or more, it takes too long. And also how you manage deleted data with the APIs. You can try it with webhooks, but you only can subscribe only for 200 tables. So that you have to find other mechanisms to be in there. Also, especially and that's also in a couple of webinars ago, with Stefano mentioned the database, the BizCentral database is very costly. So it does approximately around 10 euros per gigabyte per month, and indeed you can get more storage if you get more users, but from cost perspective, the whole database of BizCentral is quite costly. And also, if you have a smaller database, it is better for your performance. So you don't have to search for 1 million records. It's better and it's more performance if you do it from 1,000 records. It's smaller. And also, what I want to mention in this webinar, Stefano has had another webinar here at Areopa to move your files out of the BizCentral database. So you only store your data in your BizCentral database, and files must be someplace on SharePoint, OneDrive, or something else. So that's why you need to sync it, and you can sync it with the Azure Data Lake. And what is Azure Data Lake? And Azure Data Lake, in short, it is designed for big data analytics. So you can store there massive of data, and it is very cheap in that way. If you see here the storage for a gigabyte per month, that's on an Azure Data Lake Generate 2 hot database, is compared with the BizCentral database, it's quite cheap. And also that's the storage, and for 10,000 write and reads you must also pay, but if you keep that in mind, it is less expensive than your database, BizCentral database. And also what you can do with your Azure Data Lake storage is that you can train your machine learning with it, and also ingest other data from your other databases in your data lake, and then present it in your Power BI dashboards. So it's not only your BizCentral database, but also other data from other storages, and you can analyze it through it. That is also what you need for this. And another component is your Azure Synapse. And especially with Azure Synapse, that is what you can do is to have quicker insights in your big database. And also it is serverless, and the base on that is that your Azure Data Lake storage, that is the basis for Azure Synapse. And that's also the tool that's what we are going to use in this scenario. And also what you see here is, of course, you must run it, but 1,000 pipeline runs will cost you, well, 90 cents. So it's also quite cheap. What will be covered in this scenario is, of course, you have got your BizCentral database, and what Microsoft has developed is an Azure Data Lake extensions to extract your data to an Azure Data Storage. Microsoft says it isn't proof of concept. It doesn't get support from Microsoft, but the source code is open. So the source code is on GitHub. So you can take it from there and then doing your own stuff or maintain it on your own. But it just give an example. Is it to analyze or store data in a different way, except from APIs. So,
yes, sorry. A question from Sergio. You told me to interrupt you, so I'm doing that. Sergio is asking, should the BC database, Data Lake, and Synapse reside in the same region?
No, it doesn't matter that it's on different regions. It's when you set up, and I will comment to you later. You can do it in separate regions. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in this case, the extension will export your data to your Azure Data Lake storage in Delta mapping, and if it's stored there, then your Azure Synapse pipeline will run. I will show that later in detail. It will check if there are deltas, compare it with the older data that's already there in your data lake storage, put it in the staging table, and then copy it to your real data mapping. And then if it's real on your data mapping, you can do it with analyze it with PowerBI or other, what I said, with machine learning or other functions. So if I go to BIS Central, there is a page called the Export to Azure Data Lake storage. You have to fill in here your tenant ID of your data lake, your container, your account name, and your client secrets. So that's stored in there. But when you have done that, and there's a very good manual, I will share the link after all my presentation. If you have done that, you can just add your tables in here, and you can add all the tables that are in the base app, but also in your extensions in there. When you have done that, you have select the fields, and there is now an ability to enable all fields with the faded data, and it's only do with the class of normal fields. Flow fields or blob fields aren't exported in the database to Azure Data Lake. So that's all what is needed, and then just run the export, and it's on a scheduled based, and when it's ready, in this case I've selected an image, sorry for that, then it's stored in your Azure Data Lake. If I go to my Azure Data Lake, I've here created a container BC archive, and I've got a map also deltas, and here you can see I've created one item and one vendor. You can see here it's now stored in a CSV file only when you're, and if I download it, so yeah, it is there with all the fields that I have selected. So it is right now stored in the mapping of deltas, and right now it must be moved to your data, and therefore you have got Azure Synapse, and therefore there are 3 pipelines created. One.
Before you continue, we have more questions. Are you sure you still want them now?
Maybe just do it a little bit later after my demo.
Okay, yeah, just tell me when, okay?
There are just three pipelines are created. All the entities. This pipeline checks for all the entities I have exported. Then it will check for all those individual entities, check if there are deltas exist, and if there are delta exist, sorry, if they don't exist, yeah, nothing will happen. But if it is true, then it will generate the next pipeline kicks off, and then it will stage, it will get the delta and combine it with the other data that's already exists there. And that's what it's doing right here. It's doing with the delta flow, data flow. So here in your data flow, what it does is it gets your current data. Sorry, I must do on the top. It gets your deltas and combine it with your current data. I've got here a filter for all data. I will come up to that later. But when you install it, it doesn't have that filter. It will combine with the current data and the deltas that are already extracted. Yeah, it removed in this case the deleted one. If there is something wrong with the system, created that, and yeah, it filters and sort by, and it is putting in the staging table. So then it will move from the deltas to my staging data, and then if I go to the pipeline, it copies the staging data to your real data. So in this case, what we have done, what we have seen here is this process that you can export your data to a mapping of deltas. Synapse pipeline will kick it off and store it also in your data mapping. So then in your data lake, the deltas here will be removed, and also it will be stored here on your data. And in this case, what you can do now is analyze it in this case with PowerBI. You've got here your mapping, and I need just one further away. This one. What you can do is you have got here your URL from your data archive, and starting PowerBI. Sorry, this in Dutch. I haven't figured out if I can switch to English. I get the data from Azure Data Lake storage generates 2, create the call, and then what I need to do is here is standing blob. I need to switch this to DVS for the data lake and the CDM mapping. And in this case, right now, what it's doing, it's pushing all the data that's on there. I can put your inner data, and it's creating a mapping for me. So in this case, if I go into my vendor, I see all the, and I load it, it's getting all the data from my data lake to my Power BI dashboard. And this case, one error, but I thought it's there already. And you can see here your data. In this way, in this very short demo, that you can handle your data from Business Central to your Azure Data Lake and consume it in Power BI. But that's not all. What I've said is there are some helpful tips in this case. It does track the Azure Data Lake extension. It does track the deleted records, and that's you can find it in this table. So when I look up in the table, you can see in this case I've deleted 2 customers. It tracks your system ID and your table, which customer it is deleted. So it will also be deleted in the processing stage on your Azure Data Lake. So then you have got the problem solved. But there's another table. What you can see here is from the timestamps. If you got any error of this, then you can see here the table that, and I think I need to refresh this indeed. Here is stored on which tables and what is my timestamp that I've last exported it. So it will track also that you can only export your deltas. But then again, I've got all my data in my Azure Data Lake. But for financial reasons, I want to store the data only for maybe 6 years or 8 years, or in my data lake. Every data that is older than maybe 8 years, I don't want it. That must be removed. And that's what you can do also to create in your consolidation flow an extra filter. And that is not a standard if you create your pipelines. Here you can see that I've added an extra filter to remove your old data. So I've said, okay, filter it on system created at, and if that's older than 84 months, that is 7 years, it must be removed. It doesn't is in my dataset for if I configure my new dataset and combine it with the deltas. And that's also what I show you last in the PowerPoint slide, is there's a manual also creating those pipelines. But for especially the system created that isn't there, you can add that script add that field, and you can add it with the system created add and the system modified add fields. So you can filter on that fields. But you can filter also here more fields, but especially when Business Central has the system fields as system ID, system created add, and modified add, those fields are in all tables. So in this case, what you can do is just remove all data in your Azure Data Lake. So that is the main purpose what Microsoft wants to do with your Azure Data Lake. Maybe now it's Jan, time for questions. Then I go to my next topic, data archive and combining those two worlds.
Okay. Talking about combining, I've tried to combine some of the questions into one. One of the questions is, do you have any experience, any real user experience with this, with the extension that you showed us? Is there any real customer experiences, any performance concerns?
At the moment, we are also investigating it, and I thought in May, June, we want to do a performance test on this this tool, the export to Azure Data Lake, and I will blog about that, what the performance will be. But right now, I've exported 5,000 customers and exported from Business Central to the Azure Data Lake in the Delta mapping. It's quite fast. It was doing maybe 2 minutes about it. Then generating it took 20 minutes about that. But yeah, that depends on the machinery you have got in your Synapse, Azure Synapse.
Okay. Another question is about the export that you're making. Can you include any tables, custom tables as well? Is there a limit on which types of fields you can export? Maybe can you also export the media fields, for example?
No, you can only export data. So that's what you can see here is, for example, the currency table. All the flow fields I cannot export. Only the normal fields where data is in there. So no blob fields or media fields, but only the normal fields I can export it.
Okay. Okay. And maybe the last question for now would be, how long does it take to run the pipeline for all entities?
For those 4 entities, it will take half an hour. But okay, in that case, it depends on, I've gotten maybe a little bit slower machine running because I've tested it. But if you increase that, it will go faster.
Yeah. Okay. There are some more questions, but they may be a bit too specific at this point. Maybe we can keep those until the end of the presentation.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And then again, that is the Azure Data Lake storage, and I will come up with that also later. Microsoft have also generated the data archive extensions. That is new on Business Central 19. It does store your data in a JSON format in a media field. I've put here the table in the data archive table. So your in case of that with scenario of data lake, you can remove your data from Business Central, but it's still there in data lake. With this tool, with data archive, you can remove your data from Business Central, but it's still stored in your database. There is a check if the extension installed. I will show it soon, and it responds on the delete trigger. So I've created a small report, small example, just to see it visual. Just a report, delete one customer, and on the init report, I've set a data archive provider exists and Boolean, and that's true or false when the data archive is there. And this is just the normal function that is there in your Synapse, so you can reach it always. So if that data archive exists, then on the pre-data item, I've just create an archive and then start a subscription on the delete trigger. So if I started this subscription, it will record all the deletions of records in the BIS Central database and add them to the archive. So in this case, I have removed also the customer, but also remove a command line, and on the post, I said, okay, stop the subscription to delete and just save it. So then it is stored in your JSON. So if I run that report in BIS Central, and for this case, I have created a customer with no data to it. Now it's generating the archive, and if I go to the data archive list, you can still here see, okay, I have there is one customer deleted, 2 command lines, and in this case also 2 approval command lines. But if you see now, it is still stored in your BIS Central database. So your BIS Central database doesn't keep smaller in this way. And from here, I can save it to Excel and then show it on my screen. But then again, and it's exporting all the fields by tabs. But in this case, what I said, it is still running on, sorry, your data is still on BIS Central. So that's why I thought, okay, why not combining those 2 worlds? And therefore I've done a little bit of own development in the BIS Central BC to ADSL extension, and on top of the data archive extension. So in that case, I'm using the data archive as an intermediate table. So I run the report, I store it, and then I want to export it to Azure Data Lake. What must be done, and I will show you the code later on. Some modification in 3 code units of the Azure Data Lake extension. There's a code unit as the Azure Data Lake communication, and the util. That's one modification. Then I've created an extension on top of the data archive that has a dependency on the data archive and the Azure Data Lake, so I can remove it. Export the data, in this case the customer, to my Azure Data Lake. And there's one remark. This functionality will only work in BIS Central 20, because in BIS Central 19 the 4 system fields, system ID and system modified add and system created add, aren't there in the data archive, but in BIS Central 20 they are created as a new feature. So if I go to my BIS Central Azure Data Lake extension, and what I've done here is I've created some changes to that. I've created a code unit that was already there and exposed more functions in there. Also in a communication that I can append a payload and also flush it just to clear my blob field. And I've created here 2 functions to create from a JSON file to a CSV file. And that's what I've done here from the header and also the line. And also those examples are there on GitHub, and the link I will show you later on. Then what needs to be done is create an extension on top of the Azure Data Lake tool and the data archive. So in my application, I've got a dependency on the Azure Data Lake tool extension and the data archive. And I've just created a simple button, and it does do a few tricks. It creates the header. So it creates the header in the format that Azure Data Lake tool must be, and that is the format of the field name and the field number. And then I can export also the lines. Then if I've done that, just add that to the payload. The payload that I've created for my headers and my lines, I've added to my Data Lake extension. Then of course I need to initialize the setup, creating the blob field through an HTTP call and create it on the Azure blob storage, and then I create my payload from my header and lines, send it to my Azure data blob storage. Then again, what I need to do is check if the entities does match. And if it's not matching, I will update the structure. And that structure, that is also in my data lake. So here is my structure, for example, my customer table. So in this, if I download it here, and this one, you can see here the structure of the fields. And sorry, I must trust it to be a little bit more readable. And here you can see also all the fields that I've exported, in this case from my customer table. There's one field I want to mention, and that's the company field. That is automatically created. So I can also add multiple companies in one storage account. So that is what needs to be done. And so we have when this call is happening, just check if the entities, the format is the same, otherwise update it, and then I clear everything, and in this case I will delete the data archive table and also delete the record. So if I publish this report, and I've already done it, and there is an action you can see here, export to ADL tool. If I run it, and in our live demo it's always going wrong, and now hopefully my tenants will come up. Just wait a second. And it's not coming up. Okay, maybe check that in a later bit. But what it is done, it will export also to the data lake, going into the Delta stage, and I've created also another example, and for this case, you can see here it is exporting just the customer, and then the whole exercise of Azure Data Lake is already there. Creating the Synapse is just the normal stuff, generating from the Azure Synapse and going to the staging table. And it's not there, maybe this one. No. And then again, it is removed from your this central database, but it's stored in your Azure Data Lake. So your this central database is smaller, and your data lake is growing. So that's also what we have mentioned here, that the data archive we are using as an intermediate table. But then, unless there is maybe an easier way or another way, if you want to do it, you can do the deletion always, and starting from your data archive, export to data lake, you can do it periodically in the weekend. But there is also another way if you want to only remove store your deleted records only in Azure Data Lake. If you go to this code unit, ADL execution, then you can comment this line, so it doesn't track. It does track all the deletions, and what you need to do is also remove these lines, so it doesn't listen also to the last timestamps. So that is also a second way if you not want to modify your BizCentral to ADL tool too much. So that is also what I said. There are some helpful links on it. The Azure Data Lake tool that is on BizCentral. It is there. You can see all the source code from here. Also, your Synapse pipelines, how you create it and import it. But then again, that's the source. But also there is a very much helpful tool how you configure your storage account. Also how you connect your credentials, and this is through a role, and also set up your Synapse pipelines, and also the scripts are there. And then what I said is I've mentioned also some blog posts on it, but also the tool is what I've mentioned, the immediate between with the data archive. It's there. It's on my GitHub account. Sorry, I must have this one. Here are the changes to my with the added functions extra to the code unit, so you can use your data archive as an intermediate tool on this one. And then again, what I said is in a couple of months I will do some performance testing, and that I will publish on my blog site. So yeah, thanks for your attentions. Jan, I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Yeah, there are plenty. I don't know enough about the subject myself to be able to combine them. So I'll just read them to you, and maybe you can. Previously, I asked about limitations when exporting from BC. I don't think the question was answered if you can include custom tables, or in fact, if you can export any table in that scenario.
Yeah, you can export any table. So also, if you get in your PTE extensions, if you get their tables, you can export them also. Yes.
Okay. Another one is, did you try to generate Parquet files or packet files? I don't know, rather than CSV.
No, I haven't tried that, but I think that's quite a good suggestion. Had to do that.
Okay. Maybe can you explain what this file format is? Is it called Parquet or Packet or?
Not sure.
Okay.
Mostly, what I've experienced is with the CSV files, and
yeah,
that was quite fast. But I must investigate that. Yeah.
Okay. Then in Power BI, you selected a method that is currently marked as beta. Do you know when it will be released for production?
No, I doesn't know that. But what I think it's almost 6 months in beta version since I'm using it. I haven't got a release date on this one. No.
Okay. Here's what I think I understand. Which are the steps needed in order to add an extra column to a table that was already used, so set up for export?
Just
so it's
very simple. And I was hoping that my sandbox was up. It's there alive. It's just clicking on the fields and then adding it to it. What you have done then is it will automatically create, and that is, I can show it. Sorry, not here. It will check your structure of your entities. So in that case, it will update your structure and export it to the data lake. But then again, it's only for the new records. So the old records, if you add an extra column, that will be empty. For the new records, it will be filled.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
That's a limitation. So just think very good about your beginning structure.
Yeah. Is this data size? I'm not sure what that refers to, but is this data size in the media fields included in the Business Central license limits?
Yeah.
Do you understand what that means?
Yeah, I think they were referring to the this one. That's the data archive that is stored in your media files. In this case, it's field number 8, table data JSON media. These are included in your storage account. So in your 80 gigabyte storage, and on top of that, your users storage. But indeed, the media fields are included.
Yeah. This one might be related, as data archive is saved in JSON format under media field. So is media field size calculated and included in the actual database size?
Yeah, that's included. There was maybe a year when business started that wasn't included, but then they raise, especially with the users, per user allocation. Then at that point it was included.
Okay. I think. Oh wait, there's a new one from Nikolai. How much data would you recommend to export to the data lake? How often would you recommend that you run the export? Would it make sense to export all your data, all the data your Power BI reports are using? Actually, sorry.
Well, that is also a discussion what we are going on. If you export all your data or only the deleted records. And what we said is we are export all the data, because also then with machine learning you have got one source of your data, but nonetheless you must keep in mind maybe not all the tables you need in your Power BI dashboard or your machine learning. So I will mention that you export only a subset, and yeah, when you run it in once for your first initial loads, then it will quite cost you some time. Then if you do a delta sync at night, because you can schedule it also. Yeah, I said if you do it every evening and then run the Synapse pipeline, you have always your data lake always at time.
Yeah. And that's also that's also the frequency that you would recommend. So a nightly run where you export all the data again.
Yeah, indeed. Just indeed do it at the night, because then you cannot touch any user.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's the last question.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks Bert for a very educational presentation. And once again, thanks for NAV for sponsoring us. And we hope to see you all again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.